Well, welcome back to another episode of the Always About People show. My name is Chris Allen, and I'm your host. I'm the host of this crazy show, and we're here live in the studio in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, actually Matthews, if we're being totally truthful.
That's right.
But I am really excited about this conversation. It's also really fun to have a friend, Matt Hill, in the studio with me today. Thanks for being here.
Come on, man. You know I'm always ready for it.
Yeah, always ready for a fun conversation. Today, we've got a good one. As we've said in the past, for those of you who watch this show regularly, we try to cover topics relating to people, relating to what they're dealing with, some of the felt needs that we're seeing in organizations that we're talking with. We try to cover topics that are relevant to leaders and their leadership in this crazy changing environment. And so today's topic is people navigating uncertainty. People navigating uncertainty. I think so many of the conversations we've been having with leaders and also the employees as a part of these companies, people are just going, man, this market is crazy. I'm navigating the effects of COVID. I'm coming back to the office. We're dealing with all kinds of other stresses. And Sly, you know it. We're talking about VUCA today. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. These are the things that affect us as human beings. It's this uncertainty that creates stress and anxiety. And we need to become more adaptive than ever in this environment. And so we want to touch on this topic because as the market has shifted, I think there are a number of leaders saying, how do I keep my teams updated? How do I inform them? What can I tell them? Meanwhile, we have employees saying, am I going to have a job? Is my company going to make it? Do we have enough liquidity? Hey, how is my company doing? I see some of these people in the news that are losing jobs, and I see some of these mortgage-related companies that are shutting their doors, seemingly as a complete surprise to some of the employees. Am I going to lose my job too?
Right.
And then we see news and we see the updates, and we can almost see them instantaneously with the scroll of a phone. And it's like we're bombarded with this information constantly. And so we want to touch on this topic. Matt is the managing director at Pursuit Search Group, and he's talking with leaders and employees and people looking for jobs and people seeking applicants all day long. And so I thought we would just enter into a really fun conversation. It's awesome to have you. I know that you love people too. And we want to touch on this idea of how do we help people navigate uncertainty? You ready?
Let's go, man.
All right.
Let's go.
So we try to not waste any time here. Let's get into this. We want to remind you that those of you who are watching live, please send us a question, comment. We would love to address it live on the air. Even for those of you who might be watching this as a recording, leave some comments. We would love to respond to them even after the fact. And so thanks for engaging with us. We'd rather you participate than just, I don't know, be a passive watcher or listener of the show. But thanks for being with us today. Matt, let's get into this. I mean, so many individuals stressed out in this crazy environment. What are some of the things you're hearing from leaders, from people? Let's build the case first before we try to provide some practical solutions. What are you hearing?
Well, there's a lot of fear with uncertainty. Uncertainty is nothing new, so it's important for us to frame that, right? Where it's never been certain times, right? So like the uncertainty is, it's important obviously to start there, but then you look at your LinkedIn feed. That's one place that obviously a lot of us operate in on a daily basis. The algorithm loves posts about layoffs, loves it.
Okay, so this is an interesting stat, but I think it's from the documentary, The Social Dilemma. And in The Social Dilemma, they claim that fake news travels 6 times faster than real news.
Yep.
So it's like we are fascinated with the urgent, the stress, the anxiety, the fake, the newsworthy.
That's right.
And we can make that stuff travel fast.
100%. I mean, it's like whole that, I mean, I don't know all the science behind it, but our brain absolutely is more aware of threats versus things that make us happy, right? And so,
I actually have the science.
I'm sure you do, which actually I love to pick your brain on that.
Well, let's talk about it for just a second.
Good.
It's actually easier. So our brain is an efficient organ. And because the fear response is a simple, quick response, I mean, it was actually for our safety.
Right.
So the fear response, which is the amygdala, is responded to by emotion. And so the emotional response is a quick, easy, I'm either going to flight, I'm going to flee from this, I'm going to fight, or I'm going to freeze. And that's the emotional response that happens in the amygdala as a result of some level of dopamine that then brings about cortisol and adrenaline.
Right.
And so it's an efficient response. So our brain is constantly looking to respond to those quick, urgent, fast responses. And that's why we're drawn to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating too, right? Because the algorithm, all LinkedIn wants to do is keep your eyes on the platform, right? It doesn't want you going anywhere. And so if there's conversation happening and emotion is generated, people are going to be more apt to comment, engage in the content. Like LinkedIn's like, let's push that out to as many people as we can.
Yeah.
So suddenly our feeds now are full of layoff. And so anytime we go into LinkedIn, that's where it's going to start, where you are now telling yourself a story.
Yeah. Okay. So my LinkedIn feed is full of one layoff after another layoff. Matt, everyone's laying people off.
Right.
My news feed is full of one tragedy after another tragedy, one urgent matter after another urgent matter, one foreign government messed up after another foreign government, wars, terrors, all the rest. And we're in this perpetual state of anxiety and stress and uncertainty. And we just keep feeding on it. So that I'm assuming okay, so that's what we're all feeding on.
Right.
What is it doing to the workplace? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I think it's creating in unhealthy environments. It's creating all for everybody's in it for themselves, right? So you detach from the team, you detach from your leader. I just need to protect myself.
Yeah, protection.
Right? That's right. And so being aware of then how that affects you engaging in your work with your team on a daily basis. We know our brains don't operate at 100% when we're feeling stressed also, right? So all that stuff you're talking about with the dopamine and cortisol and everything, we are operating now physically. I need to save myself from the saber-tooth tiger. It's not to do our best work on a daily basis.
That's right.
So with that being said, that's why it's the opportunity right now. I know you love this kind of thing, Chris, the opportunity for leaders to really lead right now. Holy smokes, it is incredible the opportunity that real leaders have in this, because you can create some incredible safety and differentiators for yourself and your company as a result.
Okay, so we're beginning to now get practical on this. But if the context is set, the context is employees everywhere in any organization of any kind are being fed on this constant anxiety,
right,
in this VUCA environment that we're all in. And they're coming to work, they're bringing that anxiety, whether it's from home or in the workplace, or fears of loss of job or recession or market changes or whatever it might be.
Right.
They're coming to work in that. We know that under that constant state of stress and cortisol levels high, your actual rational strategic brain, the frontal cortex, is rendered less effective. One of the other interesting things is under stress, people's diets change. People tend to drink less water. People tend to eat more sugar, higher carbohydrates, and all of that also affects our functioning. Recently talking with a friend who's been on the show before last week, who was telling me about a scientific kind of research study around the effects of hydration and water. And that if a person under stress is even slightly dehydrated, it can reduce your brain functioning by as much as 14%.
Yeah.
So just like little simple things that are happening under stress. So these are the environments that leaders are walking into.
That's right.
And yet you're saying, hey, Chris, this is a huge opportunity for leaders to really love people well in this environment. And so let's talk about okay, so what do I do? Right. So I'm a leader. I'm stressed out too, Matt. I'm seeing stories of even leaders being surprised sometimes by companies making decisions, or so it's bringing the question of what is stability?
Right.
What does that actually mean? One other word that we could talk about is just the peace. We're all living in this place of chaos. What does peace even look like? And so anyway, I'd love to just think about, okay, so What do we tell some leaders?
Yeah. So first, obviously, you can't take anywhere you haven't gone yourself, right? So the first thing is just awareness and checking in with yourself. I think as leaders, we're taught, oh, you're a great leader if you're just focusing on your people, right? We got to put the mask on first, right? So that's the first thing. And that is hard because as Americans, we're not great at negative emotions. We're taught, if you're feeling negative, then run to positive emotions. Bury the negative, go to the positive. So it's really important to be aware.
Just fake it.
Just fake it. That's right. Just throw on that extra mask. That's right. And in that, so checking in with yourself, being highly aware of how you are feeling in this moment, because in that, you're going to be able to lead others because you can actually empathize with them then, right? You're not just trying to fix them now. You're actually doing life with them, right? You work at this company too.
Yeah.
And they have a boss too. So with that, that's the opportunity, is to actually step into their stuff with them with full knowledge of probably a lot of how they're feeling.
Yeah, but doesn't that make me weak as a leader? I mean, I've heard people say before, and people have even asked me this question, like, as a leader, I'm not really supposed to show vulnerability. Am I? I'm not really supposed to show that I may have some fear. I definitely don't want to be vulnerable with my team, do I?
Right. That's where the difference between weakness and vulnerability, right? And vulnerability is powerful, right? Because it's just, all you're doing is you're acknowledging the reality of what is, right? And so that's the very definition of stress in a lot of ways, is resistance against what is, right?
Yeah.
And so the reality is, this is a rocky economy. The reality is, I feel unsure, unsafe, confused. I got to put food on my table. Those types of things are coming up. And so admitting that and bringing that to the surface, and let's navigate this stuff together. And they know that they have somebody in their corner that's not only just helping them, but like actually for them, looking out for them. I mean, that is so powerful. And that's the opportunity that a leader has right now.
Okay. So this opportunity of a leader is to create some sort of new environment around them for the people to, hey, can I give space to just get away from the constant bombarding of negative information, anxiety, stress, VUCA. All right. Prior to just jumping on the show, we were having this conversation about what stability meant in the past and what stability looks like now in the workplace and in the future. I thought you framed it really, really well. And obviously leaders can affect stability. We'll get to that in a moment, but let's just talk for a minute, hypothetically, about this idea of like our parents, the previous generation. Where did they get stability from? What did that mean? How did they define stability?
Yeah. I mean, my grandpa worked at a factory for 40 years and then retired, right?
Yeah.
You heard that story anymore?
Yeah. One place for a long
right.
time. Got my retirement benefits.
That's
They
right.
grew for 40 years and now I'm out.
Exactly. And then obviously work changed a little bit for our parents, right? And so stability in a lot of ways was, what's it going to look like in the financial company, the products and the industries that they're operating in. I'm going to find stability now in that company. So as I'm doing research on a company, I want stability. Well, man, I've been for years now asking people, you just said stability. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Well, it just made me actually think of, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. A few years after even writing the book, these great companies, some of them were no longer in existence after kind of the 2007, 8, 9 timeframe. And so how we define stability in the past has been like these large companies on the stock market. What's their market capitalization?
That's right.
Like they're too big to fail.
Yep. Yeah.
Is that true?
There's not many of them out there. Amazon, Tesla, I don't know. There's not many of them out there though, right?
Yeah.
And so with that's the big thing, is if I'm going to give a practical to those who are listening as well, it's that figure out what you mean and define all these terms for yourself, right? So if you're thinking, I'm looking for a job and I want stability, well, then ask a couple more questions about how do I define stability? How do I feel stability, right? And now I can ask questions to inform myself on, is this going to give me that stability that I think I'm going to get here? But
so Matt, in some ways that's getting back to what do I value? Because if maybe stability moves from, I will have a consistent paycheck with a retirement, which some companies who had pension plans in place are no longer in existence.
Right.
And if that, my value was wrapped up in that, it's now been put in question. So now stability is about, what does the individual employee value? And I think we've seen a shift even through COVID, right?
Huge shift.
So what are you seeing from employees? What does that shift to stability look like in this environment?
Yeah, so it really is all about skill set and network. I mean, that's what it's all about. And you can find that in the company you're going to, right? But the big thing is skills. Where am I going to be developed? What do I want to add to my skill set, my tool belt, in my career? What am I light on? Where am I going? Am I going to get that here? Do I trust that leader to get me there? And then also the reality is, if you stay at the same company your entire career, you only have that network, right? So, people aren't too happy with so many people making so many quick moves and everything, but it's to their benefit. Every time they make a move, they do good work and build good relationships. They now have enlarged their network of people that if it does hit the fan and goes south and something happens at their company, they have people that not only are liking comments on LinkedIn, but are actually making calls for them and are actually putting their network to work because this person's awesome. Chris is awesome at his job. He's a great guy. I would love to help him out. And so that is way more stable than hoping that a company, when the economy goes south a little bit, that they retain you.
Okay. I want to break this down into two groups: stability for the employee and stability for the leader. So I think there's some insecurities on both sides. Let's talk about the employee first, the individual. Let's refer to them as the individual. To the individual, stability may no longer be in size of company, benefits, consistent paycheck every 2 weeks. Listen, that's a factor of stability, but instead, maybe that employee should be looking at some different things. What are you telling people? Hey, make sure that you're looking at these things. And you might not say, hey, these represent stability, but you're saying, hey, have you factored in these few things? What would you tell people?
First, it's a little silly for me to assume that they want all the same things that I do.
Yeah.
And so different life experiences, those types of things. So if I'm talking to a recent grad, it's going to be very different than talking to a 50-year-old, employee that's been in the C-suite or something like that, right? Yeah. So I've got to ask the right questions to get to know them as quickly as possible, of where they at, how they feeling, personal stuff, what season of life are you in, what do you really want, those types of things. And then from there, we're going to create a game plan then for, here's how you can get to the truth in some of those interviews and everything, because you have a well-intentioned person on the other side of the table that is trying to fill a seat. Right. And so, and again, well-intentioned quickly, that's right. Are you gonna say yes or no? Exactly. Right. So with that, you've got to understand how you want to interview them as well. You've got to go in a game plan without the generic stuff. Right. And because if you do want certain skill set, you've got to figure out if you're going to get it with not leading questions. You got to figure out what's really underneath the hood, and then understand a network standpoint. How do they facilitate you meeting different people in the company and those types of things, and support you in those ways? Yeah.
Okay. So a couple things. Stability could mean growth and development of skill sets. Network stability is like, will I have access to other people? I would say one of the ones that I'm hearing is a flexibility, because flexibility can be a form of stability for some people, because stability could be defined as like, I'm healthier having flexibility. Right. I think the other one that I would highlight is stability is defined by your leader. We know that people join companies and leave leaders. And so for those of you looking for stability, you want to find a great leader, because if that great leader leaves, there could be stability wherever that great leader goes. They might not be able to recruit you. They might not be able to try to pull you out, but stability could be defined in that great leadership. I think one of the things that I would look for in a leader is their vulnerability, their willingness to share information with you,
Yes.
their willingness to keep you informed, because that means that they understand fear and they're operating in a place of love to keep you informed, to keep your brain out of this place of fear and anxiety and stress. And so I would be looking for that in a leader and stability. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, it's huge. Stability. I mean, in terms of flexibility, absolutely. Just placed a single mother, 2 children, and we had to delay her start date 2 weeks because of childcare issues and some of that. And she's going to crush it. She's absolutely going to crush it. Extremely motivated.
Yeah.
But to be able to provide her some flexibility on the childcare front and everything like that, that's huge.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let's switch to the leader camp, because remember, the leaders are just like you and me. They're people dealing with all of the same information, the same stresses, the same anxieties. And yet a leader sometimes carries with him or her a level of insecurity. To a leader, the fear could be, what if I lose great people? And so to a leader, it's like, I gotta hold on to great people. But to a leader, we need to help them define stability. So what would you tell a leader? Hey, here are some things that you can look for around stability to make sure that you're in a stable environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most debilitating things as a leader to feel is that you don't have all the information to be able to tell your people and talk with your people, right? So now I remember when you and I worked together, I will say, you armed me with a lot of really great information. You knew then I would run it through my filter to an extent, and I would be very candid with my people. And I never wondered, what don't I know? What am I missing here? I could always, with a lot of confidence, then go to my people and be like, hey, this is what I know, guys. And this is how it's likely to affect us. And here's how we can move forward then with that, instead of just sticking Band-Aids on it. Yeah. And so I need to be armed with information. If my boss is holding things close to the vest, that is extremely debilitating, because now I'm guessing. And so that's the first thing. Or I'm being disingenuous with my people and I'm having to pretend everything's okay. And now I'm fake. Now I feel like a fraud. Right? And now I can't be an authentic, genuine leader in that way.
Yeah. Which I think people see right through
quickly.
Yeah. So I think to the leaders, I would say there will obviously be information that you can't share, but such that you can share as much information with people as you can, because you've heard it here before. In the absence of information, people make up stories. They create their own narratives. And those narratives oftentimes become stories and gossip and deviation from the truth.
Well, and that's important for, you're 100% right, because that's important for a leader to understand as well, is it's not important. It's not nearly as important as the event that's happening, but the story you're telling yourself in that event, right? The story you're attaching it. And that's where, like, anybody that's experienced any trauma or anything hard, right? In that way, it's not necessarily the event. It's in that moment, what was the story you were telling yourself?
Yeah. Well, it made me laugh, because we know that your subconscious stores memories. But your subconscious does not actually store the true memory, because your conscious mind is taking in senses all day long. Your subconscious is storing your perception of reality. So when you smell something and you walk into an environment and it brings back good memories, it's because there was a perception stored in your subconscious of that smell around a good memory. So as we come up with these stories in our work environments, we're constantly accessing these memories, and they are perceptions of reality. So in this environment right now, Matt, people are remembering what it was like in the last recession, what it was like in 2008, what it felt like in the last market shift, whenever that was. Obviously, there was a kind of a smaller one in like kind of 18-ish, but then through COVID. And so we store these perceptions of reality, and those get brought up. So when we think about helping people navigate uncertainty, we're talking, how do we help employees navigate uncertainty? How do we help them create stability? And then how do we help leaders? And I would say, okay, the typical leader, there is some level of insecurity. The first thing to a leader is like they have to know that they're getting the information that they need to be able to inform their teams.
Right.
One of the other thoughts that I've had, Matt, is that insecure leader needs to understand that it's okay to lose people. And most leaders that we talk to as we work with them, there's this real battle that goes on from taking it personally. Like if somebody leaves, they must be leaving because of me and I'm hurt. And so it's painful. But we know that there are tons of people out there looking for great opportunities. And so what's funny about this is that while we set the stage for the kind of the current environment, and we're watching all these layoffs happen, I mean, I would love it if you would tell our audience how many open jobs are out there right now. In the midst of this craziness, like there's still people hiring.
I mean, there is. I mean, the actual numbers are saying there's 2 open jobs to every 1 active candidate, which I think that's a little inflated based on multiple recs and that kind of thing happening. It's probably about a job and a half to 1 active employee. There are a lot of open jobs. Yeah. So I'll say, one, I'll go to bat for recruiters out there. Most internal talent teams are severely understaffed and resourced. Yeah. So they have way too much on their plate. And it's a fundamental misunderstanding by senior leadership, typically, of what goes into recruiting people. It takes a lot of time and energy and resources to go through all of those resumes and everything. So be kind to your recruiters. I know I hear a lot of people that say, I posted for 300 different jobs and I've been rejected for all of them and those types of things. That's one way, right? And so there's a lot of noise happening with all that stuff. But there's so many ways to find new, to get your foot in the door in those ways. So I don't want to.
Well, let's go back to that just for a second, because there was a time where recruiting was put a job ad up, put some creative language around it, make sure that you let people know about your culture, and great people will respond.
Right.
It feels like there's so much information out there. There's no way people can respond. So it's not enough to just put a job ad out there anymore. We're kind of living in a world of passive recruiting right now.
Very much so. Even if they apply, it's still a passive candidate, right? Because they're applying. And most candidates we're talking with are interviewing with 3 or 4 other companies. Sometimes they don't even remember what the company name is sometimes in the recruitment. It's so noisy out there.
Yeah. So this is fascinating because noise is an issue. So while those of us who are living in these uncertain times are bombarded by this noise, this negativity, there's also this constant noise in the recruiting world and the sourcing world. And I really love your idea of reframing stability. So let's go back to that.
Yeah.
We're talking about helping people navigate uncertainty. And so I think that the biggest takeaway that we can leave you with is how are you framing the meaning of stability for you? And in this environment where you're bombarded with all kinds of different information, how can you take a step back and reframe what stability means for you? We've tried to give you some thoughts, whether you're an individual contributor, kind of employee, and what stability means for you, or whether you're a leader leading a team through these difficult times or these uncertain times, what that means. But I love the idea of reframing stability.
I think it's important because that reframes then everybody in the process, the employee, the leader, especially then, because the leader then, you're not just attracting and recruiting. You are a recruiter now as a leader, but you are also on the other side, you are placing your people. What a powerful way to communicate stability and leadership to your team. If layoffs happen or somebody needs another step and it's not afforded in the organization, and then you actively work on their behalf to place them in an opportunity outside of your company somewhere else. Now your team's like, dang, this leader really does care about me, right? They're really actually walking the talk. And that's powerful.
Okay, so the mission of Always About People is to help create environments and cultures where people thrive. Sometimes that means that they can't thrive in your thing.
Yeah.
And without taking it personally, without going into my insecurity, how do I help people find environments where they can thrive? Well, then it's my job as a leader to make sure that I'm aware of what that person wants to do. I'm aware of where they want to grow, what they want to become, their potential in the future. And then I do whatever I possibly can to create opportunities for them where they can thrive. If layoffs do happen, even if I, as the leader, am affected by those layoffs, I have a responsibility, if I truly love and value these people well, to help them find their opportunities to thrive as well. Yeah. And so I think some of the really newsworthy LinkedIn posts that I'm seeing are of leaders who are going to bat for their teams and their team members and their colleagues to help them find new opportunities. And I love seeing that. Sarah has a question. What do you recommend for someone who has an employment history where there have been gaps and terminations? Since getting out of the military, I've had interesting transition, and not all employers understand the experiences veterans bring with them. Well, that's a fascinating question. Yep. Let's take it away from military for a second. Let's go to stay-at-home moms. So a mom has taken a gap in their employment history to have kids, be at home with kids, whatever that looks like. I think it's a real miss on behalf of employers to not value what you might get in a mom who specifically is coming back to work, or a military veteran who's bringing a certain skill set. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think some of your best people are mothers that have committed the last several years to raising their children and now are highly motivated to kick some butt in the workforce.
Well, I think we talk about the skill of multitasking, or
I'm telling you, man, unbelievable. You put them in the same categories similarly to teachers and other professions as well that have been in the trenches wearing so many hats, underappreciated in so many ways, are now coming in and are highly motivated. So with that, there are more and more talent teams. We're making a change here. There are more and more talent leaders that are very aware of, I want motivation, and are understanding how to diagnose that. Yeah. Some aren't, and they're behind the curve, and they are keeping very average people employed longer, honestly, by kind of keeping that going. Yeah.
Well, here's what I would just say. Regardless of the circumstances and the reasons for any sort of gaps in employment history, in the same way that we just ask leaders to tell the truth and to be vulnerable, just tell somebody why. I think sometimes we're afraid of telling somebody why there's a gap in history, or we don't want to be vulnerable for fear that it'll be taken the wrong way. When in reality, the person on the other side of the table might be looking at these gaps, making up stories on why you have a gap. I just think it's best to say why and to tell what you were doing and to be vulnerable. And if somebody is going to react to that in an interview or a hiring process, I don't know if that's where you want to work anyway. So I just think that I would recommend being honest about any gaps that are in your employment history. Tell the truth. There's nothing to lose. Hey, I took a break. I picked up these skills. And then with that example that we gave about moms, and this could apply to anyone, but your ability to communicate what skills you've picked up in maybe what you were doing at home or what you were doing in a break. Because moms, if you're going back to work, you have some very transferable skills that you can communicate. So anyway, thanks for the question, Sarah. Thanks for writing in. We want to encourage more of you to engage with us as we go through these conversations. And so, Sarah, just one last question. She says, do you recommend sharing about things you do, such as volunteering? Of course, because all of the opportunities where you volunteer, they speak to a couple things. They speak to what you value. They speak to how you use your time. You don't idle time, or you don't waste time. And then the third, they speak to your willingness to just stay motivated. And so I think it speaks highly.
Absolutely.
All right, we're circling back because we've gone a little bit long, as all these conversations do.
Sure.
People navigating uncertainty. in a VUCA environment, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, we know that agility and flexibility to adapt is really important. But I love how you've just said, I think what we need to do instead is help people reframe what stability means. And I really appreciate that handle, that language, because whether you're an employee, an individual contributor, or a leader, reframe even today what stability looks like. In the midst of all the news and the stories that you're scrolling through and the negativity, get back to what's the stability for you. Mm-hmm. And so we've given a few ideas for employees and for leaders. I just want to say thanks for the practicality.
Sure.
You're talking with employees and leaders all the time, and you have some incredibly valuable insight.
I appreciate it. No, and thanks for inviting me on here. These conversations they can, you and I, we can spider web in all different areas in this way. There's so many applications for a company, leadership, candidates, and that kind of thing. So let's keep the conversation going.
All right. I would say for those of you, if you need any thoughts around attracting, recruiting, sourcing, he won't give the plug, but I'll give the plug. Pursuit Search Group, Matt Hill, Managing Director. I know that you've spent time across a number of different industries, and I appreciate your friendship. You're good at what you do, and let's keep helping people.
Absolutely.
Let's keep creating environments where people can thrive, because ultimately, that's what we want to do. So I hope that this show continues to bring relevant conversations where they're helpful to you as an individual and you as a leader to create environments around you where people can thrive. Hey, create stability in these uncertain times. We appreciate you joining us live. We appreciate you tuning in. Please like, subscribe, follow us. You'll get notifications on when future shows are coming up. And we're right here. We'll be here next week too with another episode of the Always About People show. Thanks for joining us. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Matt.
Good to be here.